This morning, we're going to take some time to talk a little bit about all these matters and how you might become a better leader with some knowledge and some information from some amazing thought leaders we have joining us today. But first, I need to introduce someone, and hold on, I need to get all of my information in front of me with title and all of that. But you know what? I'm just going to introduce him because I know what I need to say. We are very fortunate to have our dean, Matt Slaughter, with us. Matt is an advocate, Matt is a supporter, Matt is a friend. And if it wasn't for Matt Slaughter, we wouldn't be with you this morning. So I have the wonderful honor for welcoming Matt Slaughter. Hi, Matt. Good morning.
Ella.
Good morning.
Thank you, Ella. And good morning to everyone on behalf of me, on behalf of Ella and the awesome Initiative on Workplace Inclusion team of Ella and Ashley and Kara. I just want to welcome everybody from near and far. I see the room continues to fill. And I'm really excited that this roundtable is convening, as Ella noted. It comes at a time where it seems like by the day, if you open up the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, we see yet another controversy around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the state houses, in businesses, and in our civil society spaces. So I just want to frame the conversation today a little bit before I turn it back to Ella and the awesome team around our mission at Tuck and around our, I think one of the essential values I'd encourage everybody to think about today of trust. So our mission at Tuck is we develop wise, decisive leaders who better the world through business. That's why we exist at Tuck. And every colleague here, including the great initiative colleagues, helps bring that to life in our personal, connected, and transformative experience that we create for everyone. But really one of the foundational virtues, I think, of wise and decisive leaders is their ability to cultivate trust. And I just want to spend a minute thinking about that word. I'm going to cite a couple of statistics I've got here in front of me. And I want to focus on trust because in our world today, definitely in the United States, and I think many of us in this conversation, not everyone, carry U.S. passports. I'm here at Hanover, New Hampshire, at Tuck in the Dean's Team conference room. But even around the world, there's been this real corrosion of trust. So let me cite a couple of statistics on this. There's an organization called Edelman. Edelman is a global public relations firm. And in early each calendar year, they release the Trust Barometer, as they call it. So a few months ago, there is the 2023 Trust Barometer. And this year is based on interviews conducted among over 32,000 respondents in 28 countries. And the headline summary of the report and the overall findings is a bit dispiriting. They wrote, quote, "A lack of faith in societal institutions triggered by economic anxiety, disinformation, mass class divide, and a failure of leadership has brought us to where we are today. Deeply and dangerously polarized. People around the world voice deep distrust of government, the media, and non-governmental organizations, both the institutions collectively and their leaders. And within almost every country, distrust cleaves across a lot of lines, especially economic class. Again, in the words of Edelman, quote, people in the top quartile of income live in a different trust reality than those in the bottom quartile, with 20+ point gaps in the United States and many other sovereign countries, including Thailand and many countries in Europe." So why should we care about trust? I mean, one reason actually, just as we make our way out of the tragedy of the pandemic in recent years, is literally a matter of life and death. So there's a lot of emerging research on variation across countries in the incidence and mortality of COVID. And one of the emerging research findings from folks in medicine and elsewhere is that one of the biggest national factors that explains the variation in COVID incidence and death rates is actually trust in governments and in the messages communicated by public health officials. But in the context here of the conversation today, like another big reason to value and think about trust as foundational to the conversations you're going to have in the spirit of why Tuck exists, is that trust, and frankly, the closely related value and virtue of tolerance, they're essential determinants for shaping decisions of people and organizations to invest in relationships, to invest in human capital. Like in higher education of all kinds, there's deep trust between the students and us faculty and staff that have the honor of co-investing with them, and in civic trust and organizational trust. And so amidst our world where there's such anxiety and fractiousness, the need for trust is, I think, higher than ever. Now, as colleagues here know, I'm a real kind of Tigger by disposition. If I invoke the philosophy of the Winnie the Pooh stories, I'm an optimist. So I'm not starting our important conversation today to dispirit people, but rather to inspire people. And I'll come back to what Edelman found in their survey this year. There's one institution of all the ones that they've surveyed around the world where citizens consistently and strongly voice trust and a belief that they can be a force for good. And what is that institution? It's actually businesses and the leaders of those businesses. So again, I'm going to quote from the study: of the 4 broad institutions we tracked, Edelman, only business is regarded around the world as both competent and ethical. Even people who feel polarized widely trust business overall, and they trust their own business even more. So people tend to report more trust in the leader of their businesses than they do in their neighbors or in people in their local community. So I just want to frame the conversation today that you all are going to have. And it's terrific that the initiative team has brought everyone together to encourage everyone to bring that trust. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of feelings and thoughts that people have about what's happening in our workplaces, what's happening around issues of class and gender and race, and that intersectionality, which the Initiative for Workplace Inclusion is rightly focusing on. But when Ella created this initiative in the past year and brought together this team with other great colleagues at Tuck, I see Adam Kleinbaum, who's deeply involved in this, and me, it was organized around optimism. It was organized around, let's find what we think can work. Let's find examples of people and organizations who are making progress. Because if we as a society do not make progress on this, it's going to continue to be a problem in our workplaces. It's going to be a problem in our communities. And it's going to continue to be a problem, frankly, in higher education as well. So that optimism founded in trust is just a frame that I really want people to have as you come into the conversation today. We often say at Tuck that we're a place for trust-based, no fear of conflict conversations. Only by having those difficult conversations can we find the most meaningful growth and investment. Only through that trust can we really develop those aptitudes of wisdom and decisiveness. That's why Tuck exists. So please view the conversation today, and thank you for everybody who's joined us as part of the spirit of Tuck. This is going to help better the world through business. And this initiative is foundational to that at Tuck. So welcome again to everybody. It's an honor to join you for a little bit as you get going. And Ella, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will be working in the guise, the environment, the stance of trust today, because we're dealing with a tough topic. We're thrilled to have everybody here to be a part of this conversation. Before we begin, though, there's some things I need to read to you, so bear with me with some logistical details. First of all, we're taping all the speakers today. We want to be able to replay so other people can learn from their wisdom and what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're making a difference. Don't expect just to sit back and listen to our speakers and to me today. That's not going to be the case. We've designed this to be interactive so that we will have breakout sessions, putting you in breakout groups after each speaker, so you can take an opportunity to see how what they're telling us, what they're sharing with us, how it makes a difference in your world, how you can use it. What ideas does it trigger in your head about doing something new and different and having a different conversation in your company? Also, let's see, we're asking you to stay muted. I need to stay muted when I'm not talking because you can see Che back there. He's a communicator dog. So forgive me when he starts opening his mouth to bark. But we're asking everybody else to stay muted so we don't get sounds and interference. That's important. If you go into your breakout room, of course, we want you to unmute and get active and get involved. Audio is optional. I do like to see the faces of the people. It keeps me energized. But I really, if you want to, I know everybody's doing other things, active, trying to do this, multitasking. But if you want to go on, take off your visual, that is fine. Please put any questions that you have in the chat so that we can see them. Our team, our wonderful team, is going to be picking up on what's going on in the chat, what questions are coming up, and then they'll feed them to us so that we can respond to them. Something else I've got to talk about too. If you saw the earlier announcement, about this roundtable, you know that Bo Young Lee from Uber was going to open up, be our first speaker this morning. Bo's not going to be able to join us. She was going to talk about Uber's response to the Roe versus Wade decision and how that has been eradicated and what Uber's response was. They've done some powerful work in this area. Well, doing D&I in turbulent times, there was some other conflicts about another matter. I have a lot of respect for Bo. Bo, we're thinking about you. Wish you could be with us this morning. But she won't be. But I got my thinking hat on and I was trying to figure out who we could bring in. And I was very curious to think about belonging and what belonging meant, because there was a recent New York Times article about 2 weeks ago that talked about maybe D&I was going too far, making white men feel uncomfortable. D&I was going too deep in the area of race. And the new word now is belonging. You know, it's interesting, when I started this work many decades ago, we started it out with affirmative action. From affirmative action, we went to diversity. From diversity, we went to inclusion, and now in equity, and now we're talking about belonging. The words have power, but what do they really mean, and why is D&I so important? We've got a wonderful guest speaker. I don't know, do I see Melissa? Where is Melissa? Is she on?
Oh, she's not on quite yet. We have a few more minutes until she's joining us.
Okay, so hold on a minute. Melissa Hunt will be joining us. She is, before she gets here, let me tell you a little bit about Melissa Thomas Hunt. Melissa is the, and I've got to get this right, so I've got to read it, the John Forbes Distinguished Professor of Business Administration at the Darden School of Business and Professor of Public Policy at the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. Before doing this, she was the former head of Global Diversity and Belonging and how do I say that, Kara?
Airbnb.
Airbnb, where she led the strategy and execution of global internal diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging programs. Melissa is full of wisdom, full of knowledge, and she's going to give us some very good insights, I think, about what belonging is all about. In the meantime, is she on?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing with the initiative for the inclusive workplace, and glad you're here with us. We have several streams of work that you should know about. You should know that early June, our blog will be taking off. Research and action. Why is that important? A lot of you in corporations don't get insights, don't get the wisdom, don't get the knowledge that us academics are doing. We often publish in these academic journals in a language that you might not understand, that's not readily accessible to everyday folks. We wanted to make that a different reality for you. We wanted to give you insights about research to keep it easy so that you could use it. You could just pull out the key points that are practical for you. And we decided we were going to do a blog, an action research blog, to help interpret what the latest research is saying. So stay tuned. In June, we're going to be launching our research blog. You can just get right on it on our website. We will be featuring during the year thought leaders, particularly those young thought leaders, are coming out with incredible work around D&I, and how do you implement it? What are the consequences of implementing it? What are strategies to get people more comfortable? What are strategies in terms of thinking about developing your D&I programs in your companies. So that's coming. We've got the roundtable that we're doing today, of course, this morning. And in addition, we also have a podcast coming up with Matthew Delmont. He is a noted historian on the faculty at Dartmouth, I'm proud to say. He's written this great book all about African Americans in World War II, the veterans' experience, the battle that they fight both in Europe and in Asia, and the battle that they face coming back to the United States under Jim Crow. It's a fascinating read. He's an amazing storyteller. The blog gets into all the interesting details. And the blog also talks a little bit or speaks to why is history important? Why do we need to consider history? You know, as Matt talked about earlier, you know, there's a lot of noise in our environment and action around history and the importance of history and the value of history. And it's learning, particularly history around race relations, is it important? What Matt does, he unpacks that for us, and he really breaks down why leaders need to know their history, particularly around race, particularly around class, particularly around issues that come under the D&I umbrella. So I'm really looking forward to getting that out. We're looking for early June to get it produced and get it, we're cleaning it up now so we can get it out so people can listen to it. It's a great podcast. He is amazing. And then the last thing that we're doing for the academics that are joining us this morning, we're doing our soiree. What's the big questions that we need to be asking ourselves as D&I scholars? What are the things that we need to do? What are the things that we need to think about? And where's our voice? As D&I gets pushed back on so many levels, where is our voice? So stay tuned, folks. We've got a lot of amazing things, a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot of activity. So please keep joining us and keep being a part of what we do and who we are. And I think I'm off the hook. Do I see Melissa? Woo! Do I see Melissa? Where is Melissa? Melissa! Good morning.
Hi, Ella. I'm here.
Thank you. You saved me. I was talking myself into a rut. Oh my God. They need to hear your wisdom, and I'm much better when I have somebody. Hey, boo. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm much better now that I see you. Let me just read this title again. The John Forbes Distinguished Professor of Business Administration at the Darden School of Business and Professor of Public Policy at the Darden School of Leadership and Public Policy. Wow, that's a mouthful. Jeez. And we're not even talking about what you've done with Airbnb.
Yeah.
And before that, I mean, we go back.
Oh, we go back way far. I remember when I first met you, Ella, and I was starstruck.
I don't know why. You saw my performance a couple of minutes ago, you would have said, huh? But that's besides the point. That is besides the point. Hi, lady.
Hello.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Woo. I'm just going to hit you right up. Tell
Okay.
me about belonging. There was an article in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago that talked about how D&I was moving too heavy into race and not enough around belonging and making particularly white men uncomfortable. We don't have to talk about that, okay? I want to make sure that we don't talk about anything that's going to get anybody upset this morning. But the reality of it is, I need to understand when we talk about belonging, what are we talking about?
Yeah. So that's counter to my experience, and to the experience of many who I think are, active professionals in the DEIB space, as well as scholars. I mean, belonging has been centered for quite some time. This is actually not a new phenomena. We have very much cared about belonging, and the origins of centering of belonging, and I'll talk a little bit about what belonging is, really come from the notion that representation is important, but not enough. You can get people from a wide array of historically marginalized identities into a space, and they don't stay, they don't have a good experience. And we've known that. Those of us who are scholars, those of us who are practicing, we've known that for a long time. And so that's where belonging really came into it. And there's a robust research program on belonging, which which I don't want to say originated, but some of the most salient work was actually about race and belonging, ironically.
Really?
So some of the work out of Stanford, looking at differences in the performance of undergraduate students on the basis of race, and with the hypothesis that if you could create a sense of belonging, that perhaps you could actually close the GPA gaps, and that's in fact what they found. And so it's an artificial dichotomy of saying you focus on belonging or you focus on diversity. They actually go hand in hand. Belonging is really about having a sense that you are respected, that you are valued, that you can make a meaningful contribution. And part of that has to do with, are there other people like me who are in this space, right? Because if there aren't other people like me, one, then I feel that I'm going to be heavily scrutinized. And two, I'm going to be skeptical about my own ability to succeed here. And so maybe I'm not going to contribute my unique perspective. I'm just going to stay really, really quiet. And so belonging is absolutely critical. I'm going to throw in something else, which I've been focusing on both from a practice perspective and also from a scholarly perspective, which is about connection, right? It has become apparent how disconnected we were in the pandemic. But the reality was we were actually disconnected and loneliness was on the rise before we even went into the pandemic. The Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who I had the pleasure of spending some time with in the late summer of 2021, wrote his book Together on this loneliness pandemic. And so when we start to think about what the antidote is, and we think about connection, we realize that that's something that has broad appeal, but it also is something that uplifts the work of diversity, equity, inclusion. Because if we know people, if we are curious about them, if we want to understand their lived experience and how it diverges from our own, then becoming connected to them is the way to do it. And it also creates belonging.
Why is D&I important today as we see D&I being questioned? Why is it still valuable? Why is it still necessary?
So I'm gonna give the business case for it, which I don't think is the only or the real reason for doing it, but I am gonna give the business case. From a business perspective, why would you ever want to have fewer resources at your disposal than you could possibly have, right? And so, many years ago, organizations started looking around and realizing that their employee base was not representative of the broader society, that they realized that, in fact, they didn't have the best and the brightest because there were whole swaths of groups that were missing that had talent to be contributed. And so if an organization wants top talent, then they need to draw that top talent from the full population. And so that's what diversity is really about, advancing. It's about making sure that you are getting the top talent and recognizing that that comes in all shapes and forms, across races, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation. We could go on, and of course, putting a global lens on that is incredibly important. But the notion of diversity is actually about, it is congruous with performance. It is congruous with productivity. Now, that doesn't mean that when you put a heterogeneous, diverse group of people together, that they immediately perform at the top, right? We have to learn to communicate with one another. We have to learn to value one another. We have to learn to expect that people who are not like us are actually experts too, and extract that information so that when they say something that's different, we don't assume that it's wrong, right? We ask how they got there, and we probe and we learn.
I think that's important because oftentimes when you don't know, you do assume, and we do not live in an integrated society. Many of us go home and we go to our neighborhoods, we go to our communities, and those communities look very much like us.
That's
what
right.
we look like. So we don't get a chance to interact with people who are different. And that becomes a very important part of all of this. What do we say to people who don't understand the nature of relationship building in the D&I quest? Because, that seems to be the thing that people get real prickly about. And they don't really understand why it's important, or do they value it? And
So
that's for all colors and races.
that's right. That's right.
That's for everybody.
So-
That's not just for, whites. I've heard African Americans like, why am I sitting in this room? And, it goes on and on. It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. And I have gotten questioned a lot about why I spend so much time in any environment building relationships. It's like, okay, you get to do that. You can have that as a goal for one more year, right? And I'm like, you don't understand, all the work that I do in this space is fundamentally built on relationships, that when situations arise, if I've built a relationship, I get to go back to that person. They know who I am. There's a mutual respect. There's a sense of, engagement, and you get the benefit of the doubt. And so relationship building is fundamental to the work. It allows you to understand different perspectives. I'll start with generational divides. I have 3 kids. My youngest is about to turn 19. I have 19, almost 22, and 25 and a half.
Oh
And
my
when-
gosh. You don't look that girl. You looking good.
Thank you, Ella. Just taking a page from your book.
Looking good.
They have grown up in my household, right? We generally have the same values, but there are a lot of times where topics come up and they have a totally different take than I do, right? If I weren't to engage them, if I didn't systematically ask their opinion on things, I wouldn't get this broader base. I wouldn't be able to look at all the angles. And sort of building the relationship lets us look at all the angles. And it also means that when we're going out to clients and going out to customers, we have a much broader perspective on how they might see things and what they might value.
It's interesting. I always tell women that I advise in their career development, I give them this formula that performance plus relationship equal advancement.
Yes.
Because we come in as women and women of color, we put our heads down and perform. Let me show you how good I am. But we don't build relationship.
That's
and
right.
people may not come and want to build relationship with us.
That's
and
right.
Consequence of that. So
That's right.
you've got to be able to be willing to build the relationship, because relationship, you can't advance without relationship. It just does not work.
And we really do undermine ourselves. And here's the thing, it doesn't come from it's not irrational. We've spent so long trying to demonstrate that we deserve a seat at the table, and trying to demonstrate that we have the competencies and that we've earned it, right? That we haven't been, privileged in some way that would make someone uncomfortable, that's our go-to. I'm supposed to be here. Look at all the things that I did. Look at my CV, look at my resume. And I've had that experience. I'll be honest, when I first arrived at Airbnb and I was doing the round of meeting all my colleagues on the executive team, I sort of wanted to jump into the business. Here's what I can bring. Here's what I've done. And they were like, tell us about your family. And this is on the other side of being hired, right? What do you like to do?
Who are you? Who are you?
I had to quickly roll back and recognize that what I had to do was build relationships. They didn't know me. I had to build trust. They had to know that I was going to be a good partner, that I understood them and what they were trying to achieve, professionally and also personally. And so it was a really fast pivot, and it's happened in other environments. And now I'm more attuned to it, but I spent so long trying to demonstrate that I was supposed to be there, that it's really hard to undo that. So I think we also have to be sympathetic and give grace, and then help individuals make that transition.
One of my favorite words, grace. Let me ask you this. You've had both perspectives, the corporate perspective as well as higher education. Is there a difference in the way we engage? Is there anything that us in higher education need to learn from the business world in doing this work?
I'm going to get myself in trouble here.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No. Just so here's the thing. There are hierarchies in both places. I think we're more honest about the hierarchies in the private sector. right? So, and so we know who the executives, the leaders are. We understand there's clarity on that. And with the clarity, that also means there can be a little bit of pushback. Like we know what the bounds are of that. In higher ed, it's more murky. And we like to represent that we're egalitarian, that students, faculty, and staff are equally valued. But it makes it harder to collaborate because we don't articulate what the hierarchical differences are. And so when a good idea coming from, one of those different populations may be valued very, very differently. And so how we move forward and how we work with people is different in those two contexts. The work is actually the same. Do you know why, Ella? Because it's about people. It's about people. And, people in the educational arena, people in the private sector, we all care. We want to be valued. We want to be seen as doing a good job. We don't want to be caught on our back feet. We don't want people to think that we are, name whatever, ism. There's a self-protection mode that we go into, and it's universal. And so across, and I was fortunate to learn this in the educational arena. And we're all over capacity these days, right? And so, doing the work of advancing diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging is really about asking people to do things differently than they've done it before. It's a change management exercise. And we often don't feel we have the capacity to do things differently because we're going full out. And so in both contexts, recognizing that sometimes the best way to move forward, we talked about relationships, but it's also about asking, how can I help you? Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And what I found is even the offer of that, even if people don't take you up on the help, the psychological capacity that you've given them by saying, you don't have to do it one way. I've offered help. How could you do it? Is really expansive. But at the core, the work is really the same. There's status and power. There are people who have been advantaged and those who've been left out. There's discomfort around that. And in places that espouse sort of egalitarianism, sometimes it's even more prickly than places where it's more autocratic because the lines are clearer and defined.
Yep. Do we ever check this box? Is it ever done? Is D&I ever done? So often when I go in a company, well, we've been doing this for years, we've been doing this for decades, and when is it ever done? And I look at what's happening in our society, and it becomes clear to me that we still have a lot of work to do, because what happens in the communities where we live spill over into the places where we work. Yeah. We live in an open system, and there's spillover effects every which way. So does the box ever get checked, in your opinion? Or how do we celebrate when we do have a win?
Yeah. So I don't think the box gets checked, but I think more importantly, we don't even aspire to wanting to check the box. What we want to aspire to is being better. Right. And as we get smarter and as we have generative AI and we, and we learn more and there's more nuance and people feel more comfortable and there's, more articulation of the ways in which our identities show up, we've got to learn. And so we're never going to be able to check the box because we don't know what we don't know. We're evolving people. And so I think it's, so Dolly Jug, I love it. The person you mean to be, right? When we think of ourselves as good people, then, we go into a defensive mode. When we think of ourselves as goodish and aspiring and on a journey, then we make mistakes or we don't know something and we say we don't know. I frequently will say, typically to my more junior or, less senior, however you want to say it, like, so there's this new word, like, what is that? Right. But I have a relationship with them. There's mutual respect, but I also know, like, I can't keep up with everything, but there are people that I can rely on, who I can ask and who will not judge me and so it's an evolution. We've got to get better. And there are stances that I took, I think, even privately years ago, where I have just evolved as a person. Because I think that's what we do.
I'm on mute because Che, and he's having a little discrepancy. Ashley, can you just close the blind and chase him away? Can you just, we got technical difficulties with the pooch here.
I think it's a nice visual addition.
Yeah, right. I'm glad you do. I don't.
I hadn't noticed.
I'm having a lack of grace here, all right? I've got one last question. What have you learned on this journey about you? Because I look at how I've grown too. And I'm always wondering, I'm always trying to understand how this work impacts me as a woman, as a Black woman, as a human being. We wear so many labels, so many identities. And the thing that I've noticed as I get older, what you see is what you get. It's like, I don't have time to be shifting all these, and hey, da-da, this is it. Like it or not. So I'm real curious, what has this work meant for you? Oh, and we've got a question from the audience too, so.
Do you want to take that first, or do you want me
No,
to?
I want to know the impact on you. You can't slip out that question.
So it's actually pretty profound. I told you I'm doing work on connection, and I've taken a very scholarly approach to it, and with the hope of having application in lots of places, organizations, universities. But it's actually taken me on my own journey to the fact that as a child, I felt relatively disconnected from my peers. I was in environments in which I was the only a lot. I had parents who valued education, and that was the thing because it was the ticket, and the social stuff was not as important. And what it's realized is I care about connection, and I didn't realize this because I think in many, many places and times in my life, I felt disconnected. And so I think, part of, what I love about this work is working with my teams and are being a force and like gladiators, like we're going out and we're helping the world, and we're a team, we're connected. And it is only recently that I have realized how important that experience is to me and how rare it is. And, you said, take me as I am. And I think the reality is, over the course of my career, at various points, I've had to be deferential. I've had to be overly solicitous. And when you reach a point in your career where personally that's not necessary, and you come in the package that I come in, and now you're fully yourself, not everyone's prepared for that. So sometimes I find myself putting myself back in the box. And that's really, it really saddens me. But it's necessary because I believe in the work, and ultimately I want to move forward.
Yeah, we all have to know how to temper. We all have to learn to do that to be able to make a difference. Are there any questions for Melissa out there, folks? We've got 55 people online listening to you, my dear.
Wow, wonderful.
Any questions? You got 55 people. Okay. All right, this is from Ted Glozier. I believe I pronounced your name right. I hope I did, sir. Good morning, Ted. I'm gonna read it. Can you see it, Melissa? Let me read it to you. One of my clients is a national player in the industrial parts business. When presented with statistic that their workforce skews predominantly male, they counter that this is the historic nature of the field. What is their responsibility to build a workforce representative of the national population, approximately 50-50 male-female? Great question, Ted. Thank you so much. Melissa, did you understand me all right?
I did understand you. So I would say, like, we can't twist arms, right? But stakeholder groups can. And at some point it's going to come back, and it's going to become salient to some stakeholder group that they have, that they're not fully availing themselves of the talent at hand. We know that there are all sorts of positive benefits, in particular when women enter the workforce, particularly in environments in which there are safety issues. There's, less risk-taking behavior, great attention to detail, all things that they could benefit from. And so I think it's important to show them the data, to show them comparison other companies, to show them what the potential upside is. Because I think, when companies respond in that way, they're thinking of what the downside is or thinking of what the discomfort is. And so we need to shift their frame, but understanding we're not responsible for changing their behavior. We can only present them with the options and provide support. Thank you.
One other question. Thank you, Melissa. This is from our friend Susan Harrison. Good morning, Susan. Can you speak about effective strategies for toxic organizational cultures? Oh.
Toxicity starts at the top, right? And so there are instances where those at the top are unaware of what's happening in what they call the messy middle, right? What's being transported down, but often they're not aware, but the individuals in the middle, the managers in the middle are reacting to the pressures or the way that they're treated, and they're cascading it down. It is a rare manager. We hope that we build them at the places, Ella, that you and I are, where there's a resilience and what we call an umbrella, where regardless of what's raining down on you, you are protecting your teams and you are stabilizing them. That's very, very hard to do from people. But the toxicity one, it's hard to solve it as a culture if there isn't a commitment at the top, if there isn't behavior change at the top. And so, when executives like, I don't know where this culture came from. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And so it's just, it's an uphill battle without that change. And we need to be realistic about that and help people to understand they get to make choices. There are reasons that people may choose to be in a culture they perceive as toxic because they get branded in a certain way, they get a certain set of skills, they get to move on. And so helping them to think about it. But, it ends up being a short-sighted decision on the part of companies. And I think in particular, in this economic environment, companies, we've seen CEOs rolling back from the wellness concerns and the caring and the belonging. And it's, back to the office and grinding and performance and productivity. One, not recognizing that belonging and productivity actually are correlated, but two, eventually the pendulum's going to swing and we're going to be back in a place where we have a deficit of talent and we're trying to get people to stay, and employees have long memories.
It's interesting about toxic cultures too. Not only do they start at the top, we don't study culture enough. We don't talk about culture. We do a lot about strategy, but we don't talk about culture. Culture can stay intact a long time after a leader leaves.
That's right.
Okay, culture has a livelihood that is absolutely amazing. And you've got to do deep work to change the culture, particularly if it is perceived as toxic. All types of team building, rebranding. I mean, it's a process, it's a journey. It just doesn't happen overnight.
That's right.
And you need plenty of data to guide that learning process and to guide that journey. That could be a whole conversation within itself. Got one more quick question. Kara, do I have time?
Yep, good to go, Ella.
Good to go. Good. I've got this team that's keeping me going. And of course, another question comes up. Can you speak about countering diversity and inclusion fatigue and backlash and the challenge? Hold on, I need to see it. Got to move it closer. Sorry. Can you speak about countering D&I fatigue and backlash and the challenge of traditional affirmative action being disallowed from a senior business lens? You want me to read that again?
Can you read it again?
Yeah. Can you speak about countering D&I fatigue and backlash and the challenge of traditional affirmative action being disallowed from a senior business lens?
Yeah.
Do what you can if you can.
Yeah, I'll do it. This is what I'm going to say. So fatigue is real for everybody. And while I understand that individuals and groups that have not had to think about this, thinking about this is hard and cognitively and emotionally taxing. But for those who have come from marginalized communities, they have been experiencing the fatigue for far long. and the danger. And so we can't ignore the fatigue. I think we have to engage individuals. We have to acknowledge that it's new to them, that this fatigue is new and it is exhausting, and help them to understand the journey that many others have been on and how they can actually help to remedy that. The note on, traditional affirmative action, we're in a challenging place, and it's gonna get more difficult as we go along. And I think the notion is we need to stay the course and remember what we're trying to do. And we're trying to value people, and we're trying to include people, and we're trying to respect people, and we're trying to educate people. That's what we're trying to do. And I think if we keep that front and center, that will guide us.
I've got to take this question. I'm going to take this one personally. This is from Tim Harding. Is faith important to you? Do you ground justice in Christian ethics or secular values? I think about this quite a bit. Let me just answer the first part of that question. I have a habit to separate my faith oftentimes from my work. I'm a very spiritual woman. And when I say very, I mean I'm in church, and I'm not a Bible thumping kind of Christian, not at all. I love my Jewish friends and my Islamic friends, and I like a good Seder, and all those other things are important to me as well. But everybody sees religion differently. I can't go in preaching. I can't go in jumping up and down about Jesus and about my God. I think this has to be grounded in values that say all human beings are worthy. That's a universal perspective on this. It's not a Christian perspective. It's not a Jewish perspective. It's not an Islamic perspective, or whatever Christian group you want to consider. It's a human perspective. There's a faith around being human and believing about my brothers and sisters to want to make them good as a leader. Okay, my job as a leader is to make you good. I don't need to ground that in Jesus. I ground that in the fact that you're a human being, and I believe human beings want to be at their best selves. I have hope. And I think that's critically important to be able to separate that, because yes, Tim, there's a lot of confusion on that now, a lot of confusion about, making everything so Christian. Diversity is about more than one religion too, for crying out loud. We can't get so locked into, well, we're a Christian country. No, we're a country of many religions, and that needs to be honored too. Melissa, you have anything you want to add to that?
100%.
Is it time for a little break? Kara, you don't know, I've got this great team. I've got Ashley Zwick, I got Kara, I've got my crew with me. What we want to do, we want to put you in, first of all, back way up. Melissa, I love you.
Oh, I love you too, Ella.
What you have done with your career, with your, this is not the woman I saw at Makers a couple of years ago. It's just not the same woman. It's just not. And I've been listening and watching with great excitement and great joy. So anything you want to say to kind of end this today with us, your time with us?
I think my words, and often when I'm talking to students, but also to employees and leaders, as you're moving through your spaces, we often attend to the people who are ahead of us, whatever that means. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about the people who are to our sides or behind us. And, if we're lucky, we will have generative careers, but our careers are nonlinear. And so when we help people that we don't have to help, that breeds the greatest loyalty, appreciation. And so let's just think expansively about who we're investing in and what we're doing, because it will come back to us in ways that we just can't realize. And thinking about that broadly, who are the people that we're investing in?
My dear, thank you so very, very much for spending time with us. We got to have you back so we can continue this
I love
conversation.
that.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in August at our soiree so we can get into all kinds of conversations and think about how we make this world a better place. Welcome back. Hope you had a good conversation. Someone has already reported out to me that their group was in the middle of a very good, deep conversation. Well, there's another breakout room and you can continue that conversation. Don't know if you'll be in the same room, but we can see if we can make that happen. Moving forward, we have a change of subject, which is just as important. Part of our initiative, of course, works with race and gender, but what doesn't get talked about enough in our society is the issue of class and developing the workforce so that more people have opportunity for equity and for equality. And we were determined to do and have lots of conversation on this topic. And today I am just really, I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Gerrard Bushell. Now, you need to hear what this man does and his entire title, because it is just unbelievable. He is the executive chair of the new Terminal 1 at JFK Airport and the chair of CAG Holdings, the airport investment platform of the Carlyle Group. He brings a wealth of experience from business, government, and labor, and he combines expertise as a major financier of infrastructure projects and senior advisor in raising capital. And he is our expert this morning on developing workforce talent. And not only that, but minority businesses. Minority businesses are really important right now. Why? Because we know that minority businesses are driving our economic force in a positive way. So welcome, Dr. Bushell. So nice to have you this morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
You doing great?
I'm doing great because I'm here with you,
thank you,
Dr. Bell, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your colleagues here at the Tuck School. And I do want to say this, our connection is through a former colleague of mine who attends the Tuck School, Stephanie Neffenicker, who worked closely with me and my team here on she was in our financial organization. So I really appreciate her reaching back and recognizing the work that we have done, the work that we are doing, and the work we will do in the future. So it's always great to be able to talk about what we're doing.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background, first of all, and please call me Ella.
Okay.
And tell us how you got into this. And then I've got some specific targeted questions for you.
So Ella, I tell people all the time when they ask me about careers, what is a career? And I don't know if I can tell people that there's a linear path. Now, perhaps for, our parents, it worked that way. And certainly for the next and successive generations, you'll probably see even, more movement. But let me tell you how I started. When I graduated, I was a community organizer. I started as a community organizer for the Community Services Society. I was very focused on how do we bring capital and credit to communities, to underserved communities, and certainly in New York and communities of color. And I moved from there and participated in the labor movement. I was a labor organizer. I was a lobbyist in labor, and then I was brought into politics by a young woman who, from the great state of Alabama, C. Virginia Fields, who was really running for city council in Harlem politics. And so she was my entree to working in New York City politics, and in many respects mentored me and gave me a tremendous amount of direction and a lot of support. Subsequently then had the opportunity to move on and work for H. Carl McCall, who was at the time one of two Black statewide elected officials, and really the first Black statewide elected official in New York State. And he was running a pension. He was running a pension system of over $110 billion. So we used to call him, he was a sole trustee, S-O-L-E. We called him the soul trustee, S-O-U-L. Okay. And so I worked with him, and it was through Carl, who had spent his career going between government and politics. He had said to me, I think it's time for you to move on and find your space. You cannot continue to do politics all your life. You need to have experience outside of government and politics. And from there, you know, he made a lot of introductions for me. And I started to transition into investment management. Why investment management? Well, the transition was one in which I had worked with over 30 controllers, 30 state treasurers across the country, and became a very attractive resource to many companies, because they felt I had the relationships, they could teach me the business. And so what I did was I went to, at the time it was the Travelers Corporation, and got a job there, first as a lobbyist. That fell apart because they combined with Citicorp and became Citigroup.
Yep, I remember that.
Gave me an opportunity to interview across Citi, and the public finance people didn't want me, and I always teased them. But what they said to me was, there's a lot happening, big integration between Solomon Brothers, Smith Barney, Travelers, and Citi, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you, Gerrard. Talk to the folks in investment management. We called it money management in those days.
Yep.
And I went downstairs, and they offered me a job, and it was an opportunity to work in the retail business as well as the institutional business. Retail.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you there, because I wanted you to share the wealth of knowledge that you have.
Mhm.
Can you stop there and fast forward? What are you doing now
Gotcha.
in terms of
Gotcha. So
built the foundation, the community, the work, and all of that, because the magic that you make combines all of that now in your present job. So can you talk a little bit about
yeah,
what you do?
Yep. So I'm president and CEO. I was executive chair when I first started. I'm president and CEO of the new Terminal 1 consortium. It's a consortium that consists of Ferrovial, which is an infrastructure company, Carlyle, which is a global private equity or global alternative investment management firm, JLC Infrastructure Partners, which is our MWBE partner, perhaps one of the few that is participating in a deal of this magnitude. They've committed over $600 million of their capital, and that is Magic Johnson and Jim Reynolds out of Chicago. And then ULICO, Union Life and Labor Insurance Corporation, which is the building trades. So I am responsible for developing or leading a team that is developing, designing, and constructing, and ultimately will operate the largest international only terminal in the nation, and certainly the largest. It's really going to be the crown jewel at JFK International Airport. So the redevelopment project that is happening, and we're partnering with the Port Authority, we have put $2.2 billion of our equity capital to work in this project. We've drawn down over $6.7 billion of bank financing. And so we are driving a project of a magnitude of $9.5 billion. We're going to deliver this in phases. It will be 23 gates over 3 phases. First phase, phase A, will be 14 gates. The delivery date is June 2026. Then we will deliver 5 gates in 2028 and 4 in 2030.
Wow.
So what is important is we're going to create this great element of infrastructure. But the way I came to this was, at the time, the Carlyle Group, which was leading the project, had a perspective which was infrastructure is important to municipalities, to metro regions, states. But if we are going to deliver infrastructure, we also need to have a commitment to a vision and a commitment to, yes, if we benefit, right, and our partners benefit, what opportunities are we creating for the community? And so they reached me in particular because previously I was in the Cuomo administration running the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, which was and is the nation's largest issuer of tax-exempt financing. So for 5 years while I was there, and one of its largest builders. So we built for a higher education institution. So we had to make sure that our students in the great state of New York don't always go to the great state of New Hampshire, okay? So we had to, so I was a booster. In other words, I provided the financing, the infrastructure, all right, for higher education institutions, life sciences, resiliency, state and local governments. But we also were leaders in minority women business enterprise.
There you go. Bingo.
Every engagement that we did, we were very focused on the ground. How do we lower barriers? How do we create opportunities? And how do we do workforce participation?
Okay, stop. You know, I got to get in there because boy, when you start talking, I get in there when I can.
All right.
Fast forward to now. Talk about the relationship with Queens that you told me about, the community of Queens and what's happening there, because that's when all the pieces begin to come together.
So what's fascinating about this project is, again, it's a public-private partnership.
Yep.
And our public partner is the Port Authority, right, which is the largest port organization in the nation. And so the demographics in terms of where we are delivering this terminal, it is in Queens and it is in Southeast Queens. And demographically, Southeast Queens is what has historically been a Black homeowner community. And it's changed over time, right? Queens, a very diverse community, but Southeast Queens, largely Black. What we have done, all right, in order to drive impact and drive inclusion. So we have to innovate, but we got to have impact and we have to have inclusion. Impact means, all right, economic opportunity, creating jobs and creating workforce participation. So we negotiated a project labor agreement with the building trades because the work has to be union work. A project labor agreement which focused on 37 zip codes in Southeast Queens and Western Nassau, where we can drive over $400 million of MWBE participation, all right, that does not require that these small businesses become unionized, all right? That's very important because, all right, what we're trying to do is create capacity for these businesses. And so that's the first aspect. So there's tier one. We drive participation in tier one. Tier two would be driving participation across all of Queens. Tier three would be driving participation across New York City. Tier four is the port region, right, which would represent New York and New Jersey. And tier five is across the country. It's across the country. So we're going to do over $1 billion of minority and women business enterprise participation. We cannot do it only in tier one, in tier two, and tier three. We're going to do it really with a big focus on how we make sure that the local community is engaged in our project, that they are hired, all right, that we are working with many of these small businesses. Now, it's also important to know most of the M's and W's, all right, and we're driving 30% participation, 20% M's, 10% W's. Why? Because the M's in terms of the disparity analysis shows, all right, that,
What's an M?
I'm sorry,
What's
minority,
an M?
minority,
Okay. I just want to make sure.
right? So Black, Latino.
Got it. And the W's
No.
women. Got it.
So what we're trying to do, when we see the disparity study that was done in New York State, it shows that participation on the part of minority firms is abysmal, all right? And then it shows that there are capacity constraints, and many of these businesses are operating well below $500,000. If you even get $100,000, that's a pretty sizable business. So really think about it from that perspective. So what we are focused on is how do we take these packages and break them down so that we can get participation. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that we have incremental costs that will increase? Yes, it does. Does it mean that from an efficiency frontier, all right, that, you know, we're always going to have what will be the lowest cost provider? No, we want value. We want value in the context of making sure that we are going to have excellence and we're going to have participation, but we also recognize that we have to create capacity. And we create capacity not just for our project, all right, but as we're partnering with the Port Authority, which is a public benefit corporation representing New York State and New Jersey, our commitment to them, as well as the commitment to the community, is you're building capacity, not just for your project, but for future projects.
Future work. Okay, hold on right there. When you start building capacity, what does that consist on? How are you developing the minority entrepreneurs, the women entrepreneurs? What's that process look like? And is there how do you select them, first of all, and then how do you develop them?
So there's a very comprehensive database. You know, New York State is one of the leaders in this space. And so when I was at DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, we were one of the key players in this space. The Empire State Development Corporation, which is the economic development engine of New York State, really is responsible for identifying and certifying, in other words, working with M's, W's, all right, so that they have the opportunity to participate in public works. That's what's very important on any public program. And so that's the first step. The second step, all right, and this is the challenge that we all have, right, because there's limited capital that goes around, right? So there are many programs that the state does provide in terms of, you know, helping provide resources, intellectual capital, back office support. But really what a lot of these businesses require is mobilization capital. That's just, at the end of the day, they need mobilization capital. So what we have done on our project is we have set aside a sum of money for mobilization capital with our design builder, which is AECOM Tishman. So Tishman, all right, which is a New York-based construction firm, all right, is going to drive the trades. And so that number in terms of delivering the terminal is $5.739 billion. So they have to hit 30% of that, all right, in terms of their construction costs. Now, we recognize that there are going to be times when we bring an M, all right, specifically an M, because of the disparity.
Right.
And we need to get them working. So we would structure perhaps a payment schedule that is a little different. Maybe we pay them a little further in advance, or we send them money so that they have working capital. We try to pay these firms a lot faster, get them on 30 days rather than 90 days. Sometimes it's 60 days.
Mhm.
But that's going to be very important. The other aspect that we do is we look for strategic partnerships. So larger firms with many of the smaller firms, and build out that capacity. So if we do a procurement, so our first procurement coming out of our construction was the demolition of the green garage on site.
Okay.
That was a $15 million procurement. We selected a woman-owned and operated firm, okay? So it was a W, it was a local firm, all right? And so our expectation on the part of this firm was that they would too drive participation for M's and W's underneath. So it's a $15 million, all right, contract. But what they were going to do is also source opportunities, partner with other firms. We got 63% participation out of that. That's how we do it, 63%.
That's great.
So look, I wish there was a magic to this. We try to be scientific, but what we do is we look at partnerships, strategic partnerships. We look at creating competitive processes where we will have an evaluation schedule, all right, that will score, all right, how you engage, all right, the community. What services are you providing? I'll give you a great one. This is a great one.
All right, then I'm going to stop you again.
But it's not in the construction space. It's not in the construction space.
Okay.
So again, we have to do professional services. That's phase one. We have to do design. That's phase two. Construction, phase three, and operations, phase four. Soup to nuts. We are looking to bring people into our firm. We partnered with an executive consulting firm, all right, in terms of, bringing best of talent. And so what we wanted in particular was and these were all the top firms across the globe. We said, we'd like for you to develop strategic partnerships with M's or W firms, all right? And that is our preference, all right? So this is how we will score this. But they all came back and said, well, we can't, just from an intellectual capital liability perspective, we really don't want to do that. That's hard to do. I said, well, that would be priority number one. If you can't do that, then I need to show me what kind of community engagement, all right, will you provide us, or supplier diversity, all right, or working through your not-for-profit entity. So we had all of them compete. They all came back with something incredible. The Corn Ferry, okay, came back and they said, you forced us to think about our business differently, and we want to be your partner. And so what we are going to do is we're going to focus on human capital development. We have Corn Ferry University, and we are going to commit 100 seats, all right, from Corn Ferry University, which is a 6-month program, all right, and these seats cost approximately $25,000 each. And so we have our first dedicated class of young professionals or mid-career professionals or older professionals, all right, who will spend 6 months in Corn Ferry University. It will be a dedicated Southeast Queens class first, and then we will open this up and make it broader. So that's
These are small business owners, are they not? Who will be participants? Yeah.
business owners.
So let me ask, supplier diversity is a very big deal for companies. What are they doing? What do they need to do to be able to develop the results that you're talking about? What do you think?
I think they need to build their businesses internally a little differently. And one of the things that I am a strong believer in, and this is what I did when I was at Darden. I've worked at big firms. I worked at KKR. I've worked at Citi. We all had diversity and inclusion leaders. But the challenge that I always felt was that these folks were not empowered. And I said, when I say not empowered, they didn't own a business. And so you've got to give them a business to own. And so what better business to own or be engaged in but the procurement business? And so that's what I did, because I would have my D&I folks and I'd have my procurement people in two different segments, and they'd be going like this. Well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to rebuild this organization and I'm going to rebuild this framework. And this is what you have to do. And everybody's going to have similar functionality. So all D&I folk need to understand procurement. All procurement people need to understand D&I. And I had co-heads of this business. And I said, if I catch you doing this, you're both out, and I'll rebuild that business yet again. And that's, you have to incentivize the businesses and then have the right alignments in place. So once we did that, all the D&I people owned a procurement. They owned a procurement. All of the procurement people owned the metrics of how you connect. And so I do that here. And at the end of the year, I'll have a conversation with people. How are you doing on this? So how are you doing in terms of driving our trade packages? How are you doing in terms of driving our cost structure? How are you doing in terms of making sure that the scope is structured? Now, where are we on MWBE participation and workforce participation? That's part of the conversation. And you can't say, you know, we can't get. I looked at a procurement yesterday as I sign off, all of it comes through me. So I saw something and it said, for a fire system, it said for W's, 26%. That's great. We're great. For M's, 1.9%. I sent that back to the team. All right. They said, we've captured that. We know it. I said, I want more work on that. I want more work. And I will call. And that's the other thing. You need to call. The leadership of a business needs to call your partners to say, this is important to us as well. And I have no hesitation to do it. So you've got to have the right structure. You've got to have the right alignments. You've got to have people in the organization approaching this with a common framework, a common purpose, as opposed to what do the D&I people think? No, what do we think as a business?
Yes,
Right.
that's wonderfully said. And that's something that folks can use, work with, and think about. What's your vision? I mean, this is coming together. You talked about 2030. What does this look like? Can you paint a portrait for me about what you see this terminal looking like and what small businesses are going to be, you think will wind up being involved? You know, can you kind of paint a picture for me?
So the
What's
terminal,
the end product?
the terminal is right behind me. It is going to be.
I got to figure out where I'm going to fly internationally so I can get through this. I want to come see.
Anywhere you want.
I love it.
Remember, anywhere you want. We're going to
That
have
is unbelievable.
airlines. To date, we have Air France, KLM, LOT, Qatar, and Korean Air. All right. So many of them come out of the existing Terminal 1. We will have another 30, all right, because of the redevelopment that is taking place. JFK is slot constrained. So what you see behind me is going to be a terminal that will capture the existing Terminal 2, which we are taking down. We'll start from there, and we will build out the Eastern Pier on Terminal 3, all right? And the day we deliver this terminal, at least phase A of this, which is June 2026, we will take down the existing Terminal 1, which has 10 gates and was built in 1996, all right? And then we will expand there. So that will get us to over 23 gates. But what's going to be key? Art and branding. So we've engaged a number of local firms as well as minority and women owned and operated firms. You know, we got one firm run by a woman who's local. It's called We Can Do It All. Okay, we can do it all. And they do it all. This is part of our art and branding strategy. And all of these firms have partnered with Arab, who is the lead sponsor for our art and branding. So we're going to have this incredible sense of place with a lot of local art that is going to give you a real sense of New York, the authentic New York experience, but also give you a sense of Queens, the Queens community, right? You know, one of my partners, JLC, says, you know, hip hop started in Queens. I have to tell him it's the Bronx.
No,
But
it's the Bronx,
Bronx,
junior high
but-
school,
but-
123, my
right.
junior high
I know.
school. Thank you
but-
very
but
much.
Queens is up there. Queens is up there.
Ah,
And so,
yeah,
LL Cool
Queens is
J-
up there, but it was the Bronx, baby.
Well,
It
I'm
was
with
the
you, I'm with
Bronx.
So we're going to have that really authentic sense of New York, all right, represented in terms of food and beverage and retail. We have 300,000 square feet of retail available. And more importantly, we have a commitment to do 50%, all right, New York-based businesses. We have to have 50% New York-based. They cannot all be from Manhattan, right? They cannot be Manhattan-based businesses. Now,
I hear you. I know what that means.
saying that,
Yep.
we also recognize the challenges that small businesses have going into terminals, right? Because your schedule is very different in terms of, you know, making sure that you have a sufficient amount of human capital to really man your stores, right? Because remember, you have to meet the flight schedules as they come. Transportation is very important. We're going to have a JFK Academy, which will be doing training and engagement with members of the community for our project. So we'll have this beautiful sense of place. We'll have incredible food and beverage. We will have incredible retail. We'll have a JFK Academy. We will have partnerships with the local community because we've committed over $18 million, right, to work on community initiatives in terms of what we call initiation strategies early from K through 12. All right, so that's going to be important. And then, of course, as we said, you know, with a relationship like Korn Ferry and the commitment of dollars that we're also making, you know, we'll have the extension strategies, right? Because we're partnering with the building trades because we are looking to get 40% participation locally in the sense of that would be laborers who are more technical, and then the non-laborers, all right, would be, I'm sorry, the non-laborers would be 50% and the laborers would be 40%. So that's very important because we're looking to create a pathway of
Yeah.
opportunities. 10,000 jobs will be created by this project.
Time. I just, you know, you give me hope. You give me hope. Are there questions? Are you willing to take some questions?
Always willing to take questions.
I thought you would be. Are there any questions out there? Mark, I see you biting at the chomps, you know, this is right up your area. So you got a question for me, Mark? I'm cold calling you.
Feel free. Early on, you said you talked about the lack of a need for unions, and we see unionization across all spectrum of work. Starbucks is trying to prevent it. You know, Amazon is trying to prevent it. Historically, unions have represented laborers and the concerns of laborers. And there's always been a conflict with the concerns and the profit motives of management. So when you say that there won't be a need for unions.
No, I never said that. No,
Okay, so I heard you wrong. That's fine.
What I said is,
But go back to that phrase, that sentence, help me understand.
in the tent of our project labor agreement, the building trades is my partner. Building trades is my partner. So there's no way, unequivocally, for the record, all right, in terms of where I start as a trade unionist and as a leader of a project that is going to hire, okay, nothing but, all right, on our project, nothing but trade unionists. Now, saying that, we recognize disparity and its impact on these small M firms. And so the agreement with the building trades is one in which we are trying to create capacity for many of these small businesses that cannot scale for union positions just yet. Over time, they will be able to do that. But we have been given the opportunity to work with these very small firms, all right? They don't have to provide union jobs, but they have to pay living wages. That's very important. That's very important. And so that's the framework, but it's not we're anti-union or we're not partnering with union. The unions recognize, okay, particularly the trades, all right? I came out of the labor movement. I would tell you this, labor movement that I worked in was largely white. And the membership was becoming Black, brown, Latino, women, all right? And so they're recognizing, all right, Gary LaBarbera recognizes how do we engage local communities, all right, specifically Black and brown communities in Southeast Queens. And so this is becoming a forward step in creating a partnership, all right, so that they get work and over time they can build a union shop. That's the way to say it.
So, thank you.
Okay.
I have another question. Thank you, Mark. I have another question from Andrew Steele. Andy, welcome. Good to see your name here. The question is, when finished, what percentage of JFK Airlines will be served by the new terminal? How many other terminals will there be at JFK?
Yeah, so the JFK redevelopment project is one in which, so we're doing our project, right? So that would be the new Terminal 1. There are 8 terminals today. The redevelopment will take it to 4 terminals. So think about it this way. You have Delta Airlines, which is right domestic and international, and they're probably the largest across the US. They are redeveloping Terminal 4, so they'll be housed at Terminal 4. They just left Terminal 2 and transitioned that to us, all right? Then there is JetBlue, again, largely domestic, but runs a number of international routes. They have Terminal 5 and they're doing development on Terminal 6, all right? So you'll have Delta and JetBlue. And the third will be American Airlines. American Airlines is in Terminal 8.
Oh,
American Airlines with their partner, British Airways, all right? So that's the partnership. They will operate Terminal 8. So when you really think in terms of international carriers that are not American, that are not Delta, right, that are not JetBlue, think about all of these international carriers across the globe. Where will they go? And JFK is a slot-constrained airport, right, which means that people need gates, or airlines need gates, all right, for their passengers. So our analysis, and certainly the existing Terminal 1 has 35, in some cases 40 airlines, and they only had 10 gates. We will start out with 14 and 5 hard stands, all right, which you have to bus to. Over time, we'll get 23. The economics will be incredible. Now, remember, international travel collapsed. So we were building this when international travel collapsed. International borders were closed because of the pandemic.
right.
Now, domestic travel is rebounded very quickly. International travel is coming back. Our expectation is in 2025, we should hit north of 90%. If that is the case, we will continue to build through phase A. So that's really, so you're gonna have 4 terminals at the end of the day.
Thank you. I've got another question for you. How do you ensure that Black and Latinos are represented, since MBWE be white women and Southeast Asians?
So, excuse me,
Okay.
allergies. My allergies are acting up.
I'm sorry.
So we're very focused on participation. And I preface my remarks by saying we're doing 30%. 10%, all right, targeted to W's, all right? And we can exceed that. So that's not a cap, all right? That's a target, and we will exceed that. But we also recognize the disparity study shows that the problem exists with Black firms and Latino firms, all right? So on previous projects, the aggregate participation for Black firms is like 2 to 3%, if you get that. Latino firms are even below that. You know, Asian firms have had participation. We are focused on increasing that, but just recognize the disparity study, all right, is very clear in terms of we need to lower these barriers. We need to create opportunities. Most of the big projects have had, if you look at 30% MWBE participation, 60% of that universe were W's, all right? 60% of the universe were W's. So we'll have no challenge with bringing W's in, and we will certainly work with them. And where they lead, just as if you have, and they're generally larger firms, they're generally larger firms in this space when you compare them to M's and Latinos and the Asian firms. What we work with them is for them to strategically partner and drive participation in their procurement as well.
Okay. Thank you, Gerrard. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, sir? I mean, you're just such a wealth of wisdom, and what you're doing is so spectacular and just, it's really truly making a difference. Any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think, look, I started my career in government and community development, and you know, have gone back and forth. But one of the things that I've learned, and I've spent a lot of time in the private sector, is markets can make a difference, and you can structure, all right, incentives in a way that will help you secure the outcomes that you're looking for. And so, you know, as we think through this, what we were able to do here in this setting, and I did this at DASNY, we can be much more aggressive, we can be more thoughtful, because at the end of the day, folks want to do business with us. And if you want to do business with us, all right, we can talk in terms of what are the values that are important to us, not just in terms of, you know, how you deliver a project, all right, but how do you work, all right, in terms of, you know, bringing your employees. Everybody knows that if you meet with me, you cannot come to my office and not have a diverse team. And I'm somebody who is perhaps the only person of color, all right, in the room at many of these large corporate entities. So it's incumbent upon each of us to raise your hand. And the way I do it, I don't embarrass people, I don't push. What I'm trying to do is build a relationship. So help me understand why you don't have. Help me understand what you're committed to doing. So it's really getting the corporate ecosystem, right, to really think in terms of its own messaging, its own narrative. And I know there's a lot of noise out here today on ESG. And I'm not talking about getting in that fight, but I am talking about how do we develop a business model of efficiency and impact. I'm not here to tell you what your values should be. I'm telling you what mine are. Okay, I'm telling you how we do business. I'm telling you how we partner with folks. I'm telling you what we would like to see, particularly if you're working with us. I think that's incredibly important, and we can't lose sight of that.
No, I appreciate that. And it's above the fray too.
Yeah.
It's above the environmental fray. And it is making a difference in ways of getting people to expand their businesses, grow their businesses, and be representative. You know, I mean, that terminal is going to make a difference. You're going to get a slice of New York that you would not normally get just walking through the terminal. You know, and that's powerful. That's giving people voice. That's giving them economic freedom as well. Are there anything else? Kara, how am I doing on time?
Yeah, I think this actually is a great stopping point to move into our second breakout session.
Dr. Bushnell, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Stephanie for bringing you to us. You know, my fellows, my MBA fellows, they're amazing.
Yeah.
I would not have known about you. I want to stay in touch.
Let's definitely do that.
You know, we've got the Minority Entrepreneur Program here. We need to talk business.
Well,
We need to talk business, and we need to get you up to talk so that we can hear additional voices of how we develop our people. That's critically important. Thank you. God bless you for what you are doing and, you know, giving us some hope this morning. Can we show Dr. Bushnell some love, everybody?
thank you. I appreciate it. No,
Thank you, my
great.
dear.
It's great to be with you. And this is important work that you are all doing in sourcing ideas and really thinking through how do we deliver on innovation, right? Because if your business is going to be successful at the end of the day, this is what I tell people. It doesn't really matter if I'm not here to beat you up over the head and say, you don't have enough Black people, you don't have enough women. You're just not a competitive business. You're just not, right? And so that's just the nature of how it works. And so we can cross you off fairly immediately, and we can really reload a little differently and work with folks. So you're doing incredible work here. So thank you for, giving me the opportunity to share with you.
Anytime. Have a
Okay.
great afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, you heard the question. How do we endeavor to do good business across all groups? And I just, here's the question. How are you engaging your small business, your minority entrepreneurs, your sourcing? How do you think about that? And I love this separation. It's not just D&I and people who are doing sourcing and procurement. You've got to bring those together. You've got to restructure. You've got to rechange. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about what needs to be restructured? What are your thoughts in terms of accountability and building these relationships with minority businesses that are out there and trying to survive, but also doing some amazing things in their businesses? You've got 20 minutes to take a break. You've got 20 minutes to get into your small group conversations. Some of you might want to continue the conversation you were having. Stay tuned. We've got Michael Roberts ending today, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at MetLife, and not Chief Diversity, Chief Marketing Officer at MetLife, who's going to talk a little bit about marketing and how do you market in turbulent D&I times. So, stay tuned. We're not done yet. Can we get everybody in groups to continue the conversation? Stay with us, stay tuned, and have a great conversation. We've had amazing speakers thus far. I don't want to say we've saved the best for last, but we've got another top speaker. When you're good, you're good. And I'd like to welcome Michael Roberts, who has become a good friend. I turn to Michael for a lot of things, including trying to be on our advisory council, because of his brilliance. He is let me get this right, MetLife's Chief Marketing Officer. I've seen him in action at his company. Leads with grace, leads with heart and brilliance. I must also add that he's a Dartmouth alum, class of 1996. Welcome, Michael, welcome. I had to get somebody in marketing when we start talking about doing D&I in turbulent times, because it just seems like every other day there is some company that is going right into the wall around marketing and D&I. I mean, even my little M&Ms, they got pulled. My M&Ms, they pulled my M&Ms. I was like, wait a minute, what's wrong with M&Ms? M&Ms are too awoke. Anheuser-Busch with the beer, I'm like, what? And as of yesterday and today, Tarjay, each one very different, but each one connected to marketing. How on earth do you navigate in this world that is so divided, so polarized, and everybody is pointing the finger that you're wrong, and that you're against me and my group? How do you manage this as a marketer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and and it's a hard question. Each of these situations, as you said, Ella, are remarkably different one from the other. But let me give you a little insight about how I think about this from a marketing perspective. And so, I think from a marketing perspective, I view brand as kind of the authentic expression of purpose. And so that purpose is not just for customers in the marketplace, but it's also for employees, it's for communities, it's for shareholder. And so, at MetLife, we believe that, we have commitments to each of those stakeholders, customers, employees, investors, and communities. And our goal is to keep those commitments. There's not some hierarchy of commitments, but it's commitments to all, and brand touches all of them. So that's one part of how I think about it. But the other part of it is that if it's an authentic expression, that means that authenticity has to start, I guess you'd say, kind of at home. It starts with the home team, which is one of the reasons why this discussion about inclusion in the workplace is so applicable from a marketing perspective, because that authenticity only can come if there is authenticity, kind of in the workplace. And that authenticity in the workplace, I think, starts with inclusion. And it starts with a perspective of inclusion that is holistic, that considers the entirety of the employee experience. And frankly, we have at MetLife done the research to understand what that means. In our employee benefits trends study from this year, it's a 20+ year study. We dive into kind of what the employee experience, should be from a holistic perspective. And let me spend just a second on that. So we look at the employee experience in kind of two categories: the extrinsic parts of the employee experience and the intrinsic parts of the employee experience. And the extrinsic parts are things like compensation, benefits and wellness programs, flexibility. And the intrinsic parts are purposeful work and professional development and personal development and social and supportive cultures. Our view of inclusion in the workplace is that it has to encompass all of those aspects. In a lot of cases, what people focus on are representation on the diversity side and social and supportive cultures. That is necessary, but not sufficient. As a marketer, diversity, and especially as a marketer for a company with as broad a reach as MetLife in 43 different markets, diversity is actually just a fact in our marketplace. It's not something that you have to go search for. If we're serving a significant portion of the employee bases of the Fortune 100, which we do in our group benefits business in the U.S., that's population level diversity. And so that's just a fact. And so the question for us is not just about representation, but it's really about inclusion. And that inclusion starts at home. When I think about inclusion, though, I think about two aspects of inclusion. One is the fact that we are more alike than we are different. And I think that needs to be a starting point for any discussion of inclusion. And then the other end of the spectrum is that every individual is fundamentally different one from another. And that's the other spectrum, kind of that we have to think about for inclusion. And then the challenge becomes, how do you navigate what's in between those two kind of ends of the spectrum? And so I think how we navigate that as companies should be reflected in how we navigate that kind of in the marketplace in order to have an authentic representation of purpose, which is how our brands show up. And so I think using that rubric, is how I look at, kind of all of those situations that you mentioned and how we've seen, and trying to understand, okay, so, at a deeper level, where are we in terms of the inclusion in the workplace? How authentic is it? How is that, how's that authenticity represented to all of the stakeholders? And then where do we need to do more work? And I think, that's the rubric I use to kind of evaluate these situations. And I think we can find, opportunities both internally and externally to continue to advance the inclusion agenda, first internally and then in the marketplace.
Yeah. When you start thinking about your products and being able to get them out into the public, what's that research look like?
Yeah.
Can you break
Yeah.
that down a little bit for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the research looks, kind of, it has a lot of different dimensions to it. Some of the research that we do is more akin to anthropology, and so it's actually observing people in their natural, habitats. Some of the research is talking to, our employees about what they're seeing on the front line. Some of it is a traditional solicited research, asking people, and then we get a lot of unsolicited, signals from the marketplace. It's things like social media or complaints or those sorts of things. And so combining that with kind of operational and behavioral data that we're seeing in, through the channels that we interact, we can create a pretty cohesive and pretty comprehensive view of the needs of the needs of the marketplace. And then I think that the key is not trying to go and figure out what you do for a specific situation, but it's really more holistically looking at that research and discovering what needs are unmet in what parts of the market, and then going and finding, and back to this point of authenticity, finding authentic ways to meet those needs in the marketplace. And that is what inclusion for me in marketing is all about. It's not just, yes, from a marketing perspective, there are aspects of inclusion which are really important. We think about inclusive buying. So that's, buying in media, in order to make sure we're reaching the entirety of the audience, and buying from media outlets that are owned by, different parts of the audience. We think about inclusive in our creative and communication. So that's visual and verbal communications. But when it comes down to it, it's really, how are we inclusive in meeting the needs of our, our customers, employees, and communities, and all of that adds up to, kind of positive results for our shareholders, because we're actually meeting real needs in the marketplace. And that is what, I think that's what, inclusivity means from a marketing and a product perspective.
I like the real needs, because sometimes I think it's more gimmicky.
Yeah.
And gimmicky can get you, oh, this is a great idea, we want this population, and not necessarily thinking through the consequences.
One more comment on that, Ella. I love where you just went on that. I mean, gimmicky is the opposite of authenticity, right? And so that's the thing that I think, that we endeavor to to have as part of our proposition. I mean, our purpose, at MetLife is always with you, building a more confident future. That's deeply personal.
Right.
Like, what does confidence mean to you? And that's also really meaningful to people.
Yep.
Like, confidence in the future is something that is aspirational in many ways, but also, necessary in so many other ways. And so I think that's not a gimmick. And the authenticity around our purpose, at MetLife is really important for us.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember the Raisin commercial. This is going way back. And they, the Raisin Company put out a set of raisins that represented the Temptations.
Yeah.
They sang the Temptation song. They did their little temptation walk. And I was infuriated. I was like, wait a minute, my temptations are not little dark raisins. So I was really upset about the raisins. I went and got a set, as a matter of fact, of the temptation raisins and talked about them in my first race and gender course at Yale. I still have those little raisins in my office, but I don't remember a public uproar. Yeah, there was, I think Black Enterprise did an article. I'm quite sure all the Black media, had a little something to say about it, but
Yeah.
it's not the response that we see today in terms of the political response.
Yeah.
In marketing, how on earth how do you handle any suggestions on how you manage the political reality of this? That don't give, authenticity is not really what they're thinking about it at all.
Yeah. I think, this is where kind of the longevity of the commitment to DE&I is almost a protective shield.
Oh, I love it.
We at MetLife can point to kind of a long history. We're talking, 155 years of history as a company, but when we talk about, supporting veterans, we can talk about, the Civil War and World War II, as well as some of the programs that we're
your history. I love it.
Exactly.
That's another conversation. Don't throw history away. Know your history. Thank you for that little drop. Okay, that little pearl right there.
But I think it's really important to actually have a history where this is authentic, and this is why our purpose, that we've lived our purpose for a significant amount of time at MetLife, and so I feel like that is almost a protective shield, kind of in this in this time, because this is not something new. There's there's an idea that woke is something that just popped on the scene and is going to cause all sorts of challenges, but our commitment to inclusion has a history that goes way beyond the popularization of this concept of woke, and we can point to kind of our commitment to, and I use the example of veterans, for since the Civil War, So,
by the way, do you know what a woke means? Okay, just as a sidebar, do you know what a woke means? Okay.
No.
I've been trying to figure out I remember it's part of our in our community. Oh yeah, she's a woke or he's a woke. That just meant that you were cool. At least that's how I remember it.
This is one of the fundamental challenges with English as a language. We have a language of usage, and so it challenges us every day as the usage of words becomes different.
And how they get transferred so quickly. It's like, well,
Exactly.
wait a minute, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
They next question. How did you get into all of this? I know you were at Bank of America.
Yeah.
You came out, you gotta have a personal side to this, because part of being authentic is, who are you? So who are you in terms of this journey that you've been on? Because it's quite phenomenal.
It's been a funny journey, and not, I don't think, everybody's got a story of the crazy path that they've taken in the world, and mine just happened to start, even kind of at Dartmouth in some ways after growing up in a community outside of Boston, the son of a Baptist minister. My father will retire after 43 years at the same church in Boston.
Oh my gosh.
So a strong connection to Black history, but my parents were immigrants from Jamaica, and so kind of diversity started even early in my life, and carried through to high school and college. But I didn't expect to end up where I was. Ella knows that all of my my college and graduate degrees are in music. I was a professional opera singer, a music student at Dartmouth, history and theory,
I
and a
love it.
master's in voice at Boston University. And then, and then there was, life circumstances changed, and I ended up in consulting and strategy. And so my career towards marketing really was because I saw marketing as pulling together so many different strings of the company. And I loved being able to see kind of impact, commercial impact, and impact on all of the stakeholders. From a seat where we could have that impact across all the stakeholders. And frankly, one of the reasons why I'm at MetLife is because I believe that purpose-driven companies have a really important responsibility kind of in this world. And I've had experience at other purpose-driven companies, and what MetLife is doing kind of in order to be a force for good in the world, through all of its commercial activities and community activities and employee activities is something I think is really, really special. And so I'm really proud to be part of a team that is prioritizing inclusion and has for a very long time.
I'm going to sway way off. I teach a course at Tuck called Leadership Out of the Box. And one of the things we always want to do in this class is to talk about leadership criteria. What, in your view, makes a leader? And that's not part of our topic, but I can't miss this opportunity to ask, what's leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's such
Gotcha.
an interesting thing. Yeah, it's so a couple things. One, I reject this dichotomy that gets presented when we talk about leadership between leadership and management. I think that both are necessary, and one is not better than the other. They're just a different set of tools to use in different situations. And so I that's my first point, because we get asked about leadership all the time, and then and management gets denigrated. But it's important. It's really important to have a toolkit, in order to be able to manage, the situations that one is in. So that's just one, kind of, pet peeve of mine that I wanted to get out. The second thing is that, I think it's important, in this day and age, to think about new ways of working, and then think about leadership in those new contexts, right? There are some, you can go through all of the kind of the standard set of leadership kind of qualities and behaviors, and those are all still important and all of that sort of stuff. But I think really, the skill for leadership now is being able to adapt to new ways of working. And those ways of working are changing dramatically. We are no longer kind of in this world where, the military influenced hierarchy, combined with the manufacturing processes applied to work are the dominant ways of working and ways of structuring. And so I think the key for me in leadership right now is adaptability to new ways of working. And that's, I think, something that has to be studied, because I think it's relatively new. We are still trying to figure out this new world of work from a location perspective. We are applying Agile to and principles to just about everything. We're breaking down silos and barriers. We're applying AI to work processes. All of that is going to require different set of skills that adapt to a dynamic and changing world of work. And so for me, we can go through all of the other great qualities of leaders that we all probably could list from our own experiences. But I think the real challenge is going to be, what does leadership mean in a new world of work and with new ways of working?
And I think we're still in the process of birthing that world. We're
I
not,
agree.
that world is still in the process of becoming, which is why there's so much turbulence, because we are in a major shift in our reality on so many fronts, on so many levels. What would you tell aspiring students coming out of an MBA program in terms of, want to be the creative marketeer?
Yeah.
What's skills that they should have in their skill set, their tools in their toolbox rather, to be able to navigate this terrain? What do you need to navigate this terrain, both
Yeah.
inside and within the company? What's your team need to look like on this?
Yeah.
And not just, the diversity side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, marketing is fundamentally a technical discipline. It's analytics plus execution, brought alive by creative. And so I think there is a increasing need for leaders in marketing to have technical competency and capability, and be able to coach expert teams, and add value to expert teams, even if they're not an expert, which means that there has to be a base level of technical capability and competency. And then the marketing leaders need to know where and how they can add value to those expert teams. So I think that's one of the most important things I think that's now in marketing. I think what I'm seeing is that these archetypes of marketing kind of roles, whether it's brand marketing versus performance marketing or marketing operations versus creative, all of that is no longer relevant in some ways, for the marketing leader, because leaders can't identify as only one of those things, because it's all of those things that make marketing come together. And those are all very technical and specific disciplines. So that's number one. I think the number two is marketing is a reflection of culture in two different ways. One, it's the internal corporate culture, and so understanding what that culture is and how you work within, but it's also intersecting with culture outside. And so understanding and being a student of culture both internally and externally is absolutely kind of a necessary skill for marketers to have. And brands operate differently, kind of within culture. Some brands are trying to create culture, and so they're starting at the subculture level and moving to pop culture and then mass culture. And some brands, kind of are trying to express, kind of their internal culture as a mechanism to exist in the world. And there's everything in between. And so I think that cultural understanding and appreciation of where the company sits internally as well as externally is another really important skill. And then I think the third skill for marketers is clarity on how marketing delivers, outcomes for stakeholders, and making sure that is measurable and material. We can't, as marketers, continue to have our own language of marketing outcomes that we force everybody else to translate into the outcomes for the stakeholders. We actually have to go and do that translation and making sure that we're having an impact on the outcomes that we want for stakeholders. Our commitment to customers is to build remarkable and enduring relationships. That is measurable. And it is measurable, kind of across the business, and we have to, as marketers, understand how we contribute to that, as an example.
Does political astuteness fit into this? Because it seems to me that marketing is getting more and more political in terms of, the organizational position, more so than strategy, finance, and the other areas.
Yeah, I think marketing communications, that's one of the reasons why I mentioned culture internally and externally, because the intersection of those two things, kind of has, can be really charged, and awareness and understanding of that, it's not just about the political astuteness, but it's really kind of how do we make sure that the expression of the brand fits in both of those contexts, that that we want to be in. And so some of that is politics, but a lot of it is understanding and the ability to actually execute kind of within the context of the culture internally and the culture externally.
Isn't it also a part of where you want to be, what you stand for too? It's your part of your authenticity.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, and I think transparency in marketing is really important. Transparency for companies is really important. That's why you're seeing, I'll use MetLife as an example. You're seeing MetLife be transparent about, sustainability and DE&I goals, because it indicates, a little bit of what we stand for. It's not the only thing, but it is representative, and that transparency is now being required as part of both the internal and external culture, right? So the external culture and what people are looking for in work and from their partners, in the B2B sense,
Yep.
is kind of a necessary thing, and employees are looking for transparency about where the company is making commitments and what they're committing to do for all of the stakeholders. And so I think that becomes a big part of the equation. And
giving people choice, because it's something that I want a part of, that I can leave.
Yeah, but also
an important thing too.
But I also think it's optionality too, right? So
to have the option.
It's optionality also within companies and in the marketplace for people to make choices about how they want to live their purpose through their employer or through their brand. And that optionality exists, and it exists in many situations. I think some of the turbulence that we're seeing is that people aren't recognizing that brands are providing optionality. Like, you can participate in ways, and companies are providing optionality as well in how you participate in living your individual purpose, inside a company as an employee, and living your, individual purpose, through the brands that you associate with. And there is elasticity kind of in those brands for people to have, kind of an individual purpose. This goes back to the continuum of like, we're more alike than we are different, and you also have individual agency, at the same time. And I think we spend too much time in the middle of those two things, and argue about the middle when the truth is on the edges.
Yep, I love your brilliance. I just love your brilliance and thinking through this, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. But when I talk to you, it's like, okay, yep, providing clarity in the darkness. Let's take a few questions, because I would imagine we've got some questions here, and I'm trying to get over to my chat. Okay, Kara just announced for questions. I don't see any yet. Kara, you're going to have to read them, because my screen is doing something a little bit different.
Hey, Ella, can I ask a question?
Yes, come right on in.
Thanks.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Ella and I go way back. So for those of you who don't know, Ella taught me at MIT. And I'm an MIT Sloan 93 graduate. So I made her cry when I showed up in August and walked in on her and Matt doing she's cutting me off. Here's my question, Michael, because we're seeing some crazy high profile things happen.
Yeah.
And I'll use Bud as an example, but only as an example, okay? Not a political statement. Large organizations, global corporations are trying hard to really engage in the conversation, to show that they're starting to think differently, and they're starting to expand, who's invited in, who they speak to. So when you think about MetLife and the role you play in the market, and then you watch some of your corporate, siblings misstep, and not for lack of trying, but we live in a world, a Twitterverse, a Twitter space that the scrutiny is unprecedented. When you see that, I'm curious sort of how you advise leadership, and what's the dynamic that goes on in that decision-making forum, as MetLife looks to sort of advance marketing and really speak to a new marketplace, a marketplace that's a far cry from the 60s, the 50s, the 70s, quite frankly. And now the variety, the diversity out there, you have to talk to, you have to market to. How do you engage your leadership and they wag a finger about, but and you respond. So
yeah, I'll go back to kind of, something I said a little bit before, and on this one is, for big global brands, diversity in the marketplace is a fact. The marketplace that we operate in is a diverse place. I would argue that it was a diverse place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as well, right? Like the ratios in the population have changed, and kind of over decades they shift, but it's not fundamentally, I don't see a fundamental change that's happened in the last 3 years. Right? It's like the demographics haven't shifted in the last couple of years that dramatically. And so that's one point. Demographics are shifting, but demographics don't solve the problem of inclusion at all. So the hope of demographics solving the problem of inclusion. And so this brings us to the point I think that you're making, Mark, is that companies actually have to do something in these spaces. And my view on this is that and what I talk to my colleagues about is that actions speak louder than words, and actions with impact speak louder than actions that are symbolic. And so we look for alignment and impact in trying to drive the inclusion agenda, and a lot of what is focused on it's not core to who these companies are when there are challenges. And so I think for us, we think about alignment and impact, and that generally keeps us keeps us advancing and evolving as a company, but it doesn't create a discontinuity for our customers. It's evolution versus revolution, and I think that's where we want to be as a company, is continuing the progress that we have been making over years. And I think that's what that's the discussion that I have with my peers is how do we build on the foundation that we have? How do we continue to progress? How do we continue to acknowledge that diversity is a fact in the size of the marketplaces that we deal with?
Thank you, Mark.
thanks, Mike.
Any other questions, Karen?
I don't see any others in the chat right now, but if other folks have anything, please feel free to raise your hand or pop something in the chat.
Michael, I know you're busy.
Yeah.
Any ending words for us, words of wisdom for us?
Yeah, I'll just commend you, Dr. Bell, for convening a group that focuses on inclusion in the workplace, because as I said earlier on, that this is where it starts. Like we don't get to as companies, we don't get to talk about authentically what we want to do in the world if we're not doing it ourselves. We don't get to incorporate inclusive aspects into products or services or experiences if we're not doing it ourselves. And so this inclusion in a workplace, I think, is a foundation for how to Mark's point, that we continue the progress of a more inclusive marketplace with companies. And so I think this becomes a really important foundation. I'll use one last example is, we are a B2B company and a B2B2C company in the US, and in a couple different businesses, whether it's our investing business or our benefits business. And the conversation with our partners and clients in those spaces starts with us as an actor, and then proceeds to kind of how that translates into the products and services that we are providing. And so even from a purely commercial lens, what we do in terms of driving an inclusive workplace, is really, really meaningful. And we can talk about all of the other reasons why inclusion is important, but from where I sit from a commercial impact perspective, this conversation and the advancement in this space is critical.
Well, I want to thank you. I look forward to talking to you about other things. You've got so much wisdom, and I look forward to getting you on our advisory council, so that we can continue to get that wisdom from you.
Yeah.
Have a great holiday weekend, and thank you so much for the time and joining us, Michael.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the time.
Can we show Michael a little love, a little clapping there? Those who are less pretty, please.
Yeah, it's great to see you all.
Take care, Michael.
All right, take care. Thanks, Dr. Bell.
Couple things I want to talk about with you before we end. I don't know if we need a breakout group, but can we see everybody on chat? If you have questions, so you can be a part of this conversation. We got a good number of people still left. So come on and let me see. Let's see what you look like. Because I haven't been able to see the group at all. So I'm totally frustrated about that. But some takeaways for us to talk about today. Here comes Ashley. She's going to make sure I can see. She's going to make sure I can see. I'm a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur. I want to see. There they are. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. Nice to see everybody. Wow. What time is it? 11:25, right on time. Couple things I want to talk about with you before we end. I don't know if we need a breakout group, but can we see everybody on chat? If you have questions, so you can be a part of this conversation. We got a good number of people still left. So come on and let me see. Let's see what you look like. Because I haven't been able to see the group at all. So I'm totally frustrated about that. But some takeaways for us to talk about today. Here comes Ashley. She's going to make sure I can see. She's going to make sure I can see. I'm a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur. I want to see. There they are. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. Nice to see everybody. Couple of things come to mind. First and foremost, D&I is important. Diversity, inclusion, equity is critically important, and it's not going away. Yes, there's a struggle in front of us. There's a huge struggle in front of us. I remember, Adam, you and Stacy putting D&I at the core of the management course. And what did we hear from Michael? Diversity is at the core of everything. You weren't crazy. Belonging is not new. I learned that from Melissa today. Because, I was like, what's this belonging mean? And she was like, the work at Stanford is yada, yada, yada. And it's an old term. I didn't know that. Something that I think we're all uncomfortable with. Organizations are political, like it or not. And we're going to have to get involved in politics and figuring out how to navigate, how to get our products out there, how to get our services out there, how to attract an array of customers and clients That's not new. That's not going away, but it is highly, highly, highly political now. And we're going to have to learn to get used to that, because I think there was a myth that organizations were apolitical. That is not true. There's light in the tunnel. Thank you, Dr. Bushnell. There are going to be people who are going to be getting jobs, getting developed, getting trained, and JFK is going to look like a whole different reality in his terminal. And that's good to hear. We need to hear the good news as well as the bad news. There's a lot that we have to continue to do. We've only just begun. And it's not just us on this podcast. We've got to be sure that other people are involved. And that's what we do here in our roundtables, to try to build connections, build links, build new relationships, and understand ways that we can support and learn from each other, learn from our guests, and how can we support each other in our endeavors in moving forward to make our world a better place, based on everybody being involved and people being active and people having an opportunity. Lots to do, lots to do. I'd like to thank, and I've got to get my list out here. First of all, I'd like to thank my team. You've been hearing Kara's voice all day, all morning. Kara Whitfield is just absolutely amazing. She is the program manager for the initiative. Can we show her some love? Because we would not be here without her, trust me. And then we have our new executive director who has been in place, Ashley Zwig. Is he with us? Did I get the name right, Ashley? Always have to ask to make sure I get names. Where are our student fellows? Are they around? Sean is around. Can you guys just say hello, get on speaker and say hello, pretty please?
I think I'm timing wise the last one left, so I'll make an intro on behalf of everybody.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure, I'm a current, just closing out actually current first year Tux student, and I'm super excited to be part of the workplace initiative as workplace inclusion initiative as a fellow. Yeah, I can talk more about me, but as a group, we're first year and second year students that have all opted in and been selected to support Ella and Ashley and Kara with the work of the program. So I was kind of in the background writing up a bunch of notes for this, and just really great to be a part of it all and learn and kind of soak up as much information as I can while I'm in such a place of learning at Tuck.
We had 13 fellows this year, first and second years, and this work stream was the roundtable work stream. Kara, can you give out the names? Can you tell us the names of the other fellows who were actively involved in this?
Yeah, so we have Sean here. Thank you, Sean, again. Anya Aliev, who's a class of 23, Shohini Kundu, a class of 23, Sydney Reichert, a first year class of 24, and Abhishek Sunapti, also a class of 24. So thank you all for being part of this and for helping to bring this to life. We appreciate you.
We couldn't do this without our fellows. I could not do this without my team. Thank you for taking time to be with us. We're planning another roundtable in the fall. If you've got suggestions, people for us to talk to, panel ideas, let me know, let us know. I'm quite sure we'll find lots of things, but it's always good. We're trying to build a community. It's always good to hear from our community and how we can service you better in terms of your needs and building an inclusive workplace. Have a great holiday weekend. Thank you for taking time, making the time to be with us. And, stay tuned. We've only just begun. Thanks again, and bye, everybody.
And thank you to Ella for being the spiritual leader of this whole initiative. Thank you, Ella.
You're welcome,
Thanks, everybody.
Adam. You're welcome. You're welcome. Mark, I'm going to get you when I see you. And thank you. Hope everybody got to meet everybody. Have a great weekend.